Welcome back, everybody, to the Minecraft Short Stories podcast. This episode today, as you saw by the title, obviously, this is the third part of The Curse of the Wither, which is a story by Catmaster6. To listen to this story, I would recommend listening to the first episode. The second one also is related, the part 2 that is, but it is not completely necessary, but it's still a help. So go listen to those before you listen to this one. Anyways, this story was submitted through my website, minecraftshortstories.com, link inside the description. While there, you can also sign up for the bonus email list, where I send out news and updates. While you're down inside the description as well, there's also a link to the YouTube channel. Once we reach 1,000 subscribers, I will do a 3 or 4 way collab with some other Minecraft players. We're at 270, 280 something right now. Anyway, you guys came for the story, so let's get right into it. The Curse of the Wither, Part 3, story by Catmaster6. The first thing Steve noticed was the warm, red moss-like substance that he was lying on. The next was the almost unbearable heat and the smell of brimstone. He pushed himself to his feet and gasped at the sight before him. Steve was standing on a cliff, covered in red moss, overlooking a huge lake of rolling lava. Far in the distance, on the other side of the lake, he could see an expansive dark red structure. The structure, which Steve assumed to be a nether fortress from the Book of Secrets of the Fortresses, was built on an ash-colored biome with a very jagged landscape. Examining the area surrounding the portal he had just come through, Steve realized that he was in a crimson forest biome. The forest was full of vegetation of all sorts of shades of red, the most notable of which were the giant treezor mushrooms. Steve couldn't tell. As Steve looked again at the fortress, he noticed something he hadn't before. The biome between it and the current location was a soul sand valley. Yes, Steve said out loud as he confirmed that the soul sand was indeed the same block that made up the statue in the painting. With that in the fortress, he was making progress. Without hesitation, Steve started to make his way into the valley of dark brown blocks. As he came over a rise in the forest, he encountered a problem. To reach the valley, Steve needed to make his way down the cliff dotted with lava flows. A sudden sharp wailing broke the silence, the sound of someone in pure anguish. Without a second thought, Steve reached for his golden sword, the one he had acquired at the portal. The cry came again, and Steve cringed at the awful noise. A thought came to him. Why am I in the forbidden nether? He had remembered the painting and the entire journey here, but the actual reason eluded him. I need to get back to the No, Steve interrupted himself. You need to get the soul sand and wither skulls. And just like that, he remembered. He took a deep breath. The soul sand is just down the cliff. Steve assessed the slope. If he took it one short hop at a time, he would make it to the bottom safely, provided he avoided the streams of glowing lava. After a few dozen seconds of careful climbing, Steve came to a particularly steep part of the cliff. The safest way down that Steve could find was dangerously close to lava, but he knew he had to risk it. Just as he resumed his descent, Steve heard again the cry, but much closer this time. Looking up, he nearly fell back as he saw an enormous tentacled white cube floating in the air. It had a sad, drooping face, and seemed to cry, its tears sizzling and drying up before falling far. Before Steve could react, it opened its mouth and blasted a blazing fireball at him. With a jolt of fear, Steve leapt out of the way of the fire projectile and felt immense heat on his back as the fireball exploded upon the cliff that was behind him. For a moment, Steve felt weightless as he sailed through the air, then time seemed to slow down as he began to fall. Red-hot agony coursed through Steve's body as he landed in the lava flow. His health going down at an alarming rate. Steve crawled out of the lava and onto the redstone of the cliff. His health wasn't decreasing as fast now, but it was still creeping dangerously lower from the fire that had caught his clothing. Steve thought wildly for a way to save himself, frantically searching his inventory. Seconds passed, and he came up with nothing. Then, with less than a quarter of his health remaining, Steve's hand came across a golden apple from the ruin portal. He ate as fast as he could, finishing just as his health decreased to nothing more than a sliver. The fruit's region combated the damage from the fire, which went out a second later. Letting out a shaky sigh of relief, Steve glanced up. The floating white cube had lost interest in him and was flying away, still wailing mournfully. Hello, human. The ethereal voice startled Steve as he was mining the blocks of soul sand. He looked around and, seeing nothing, went back to work, assuming he had imagined it. You might want to talk to me. Steve looked around still, but saw nothing. Who's there? Me. A shadow rose from the dark sand, seemed to be made out of smoke, swirling faintly, and its eyes were orbs of piercing blue light. Steve stepped back, startled. There's a presence inside you, human, the shadow said. What do you mean? Steve asked, shaken. A spirit has fogged your mind and bent you to its will. How do you know? We spirits can sense each other. However, it is very faint, so I'm assuming he's possessing you from a location in the overworld, where it cannot reach you as well in the nether. Understanding suddenly came to Steve. It's evil, isn't it? Yes. The spirit began to pace in a slow circle around him. It wants to destroy every living thing in the overworld, the nether and the end. It is an ancient being known as the Wither. What's the end? Never mind that. You're currently able to think for yourself, correct? Don't listen to him, said a voice in Steve's head. He's the evil one, not me. I can offer you great power and riches. For the time being, Steve answered through gritted teeth, trying to ignore the voice that brought along a throbbing headache. Then, for as long as you can control yourself, don't do anything it says. The spirit stopped pacing and fixed its gaze on him. You must not let it destroy everything. You won't like this, human. I need to possess you and fight the Wither from the inside. And is this dangerous? Very. Just one spirit possessing you would tear you apart from the inside in a matter of days. 2 spirits at once, that would be more than half the time, especially if the spirits are combating each other. Thought of such a death sent a chill through Steve's body, but then he thought of a barren overworld, devoid of life, and with sudden determination, he made up his mind. Possess me. The spirit advanced towards him, and Steve closed his eyes, holding his breath in anticipation of the awful sensation he had felt when he touched the painting. But instead of pure agony, Steve felt an immense cold throughout his body. He gasped out the feeling and opened his eyes. The spirit was gone. Hello, Steve. The spirit's voice inside Steve's head made him jump. Once his racing heartbeat slowed, he asked, So you've possessed me? Yes, and you don't need to speak out loud now. I can hear your thoughts. After a brief pause, the spirit asked, Is there anything you want to ask before I fight the Wither? Yeah, Steve thought. What's your name? How rude of me. I never introduced myself. My name is Herobrine. Bum bum bum. Thanks to Catmaster6 for submitting that story, and also submitting a lot of other stories. I believe Catmaster6 is the main, well, not main, but the most prominent submitter of all of them. By prominent, I mean, has submitted the most. So, even more thanks to Catmaster6 for all these great stories I could read on the podcast. And also to every other listener who's submitted a story that has been read on the podcast, or not on the podcast, because I enjoy reading them. If you made this far, thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next weeks. I have tests, so maybe 2 weeks. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.